Hey there, everybody. How are you doing? It's a lovely, lovely day. Glad to be here with all of you. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. It is Tuesday night, December 9th. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have yet another great chat. So let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and we're going to have yet another great late night conversation. Just like every other night, right? We do these live streams. Soon it will be 1,000 live streams. Can you believe it? Soon we will reach number 1,000. I have a hard time even comprehending that. It does not seem like 1,000 times I've been on here, but apparently it has. I started doing these streams shortly before the pandemic, and it really took off during the pandemic, and now we are approaching 1,000 live streams. Can you believe it? But anyhow, tonight we're going to follow our usual format, which is that first I give my opening remarks. After my opening remarks, we then do a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there is something that you would like me to address within the second half of the show, the best thing to do is send me a question. Send in a question. You can do it via Rumble Rants on the Rumble. You can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. But the absolute best, BEST way, best way to send questions is buy me a coffee. And Penny already did it. We've already got one coffee to start out the show tonight. Send questions via buy me a coffee. That's the way we do it. Now, the big announcement we've got is coming up January 11th. The Center for Political Innovation is having our New Year's event in Newark, New Jersey, near the Newark airport. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Food buffet for everyone who comes, good food, music, speeches. Garland Nixon will be in town. We'll be honoring some important local activists and friends. It's going to be a great, great day. Sunday, January 11th. So we need you to be there. Go ahead and register to join us on Sunday, January 11th. You will not regret it. It will be fun for all. It will be a great day. It's just a great, great place, great venue, great people are going to be there. It's going to be a great meet up and get together for our community, our organization. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in January. January 11th, we're going to have a Center for Political Innovation meetup in New Jersey. It's going to be great. Music, speeches, the whole 9 yards. We're going to give out some awards. You will like it. Everyone who comes will get the book of last year's convention proceedings, right? We had the Russian dancers at the convention last year. This is the book, the coffee table book of the full transcription of last year's convention, full color. Oh, it's really nice. And, and we're going to have a long Q&A at the end after dinner where everyone who's there will get to talk and get to ask a question. It'll all be documented and recorded. It's going to be a great, great time. So I hope that you join us on January 11th in New Jersey. Go ahead and register. You don't want to miss it. Now, as I said before, we're going to follow our usual format for tonight. I'll be giving my opening remarks, followed by the roll call, and then I will answer your questions for the remainder of the show. So if you've got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, please send a question via Buy Me a Coffee. You can also do Rumble rants on the Rumble, and you can also cash at me at CalebMoppin22. But the best way, the absolute best way, the best way to send questions is buy me a coffee /CalebMoppin. That's the way we do it. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Shebang, shebang, boom-a-loom-a-loom, tooraloo-raloo, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Yeah, I don't know what other slang and weird words you want me to use, but that's the way we do it. So hope to see you all there. Send me some good questions. So tonight I wanted to talk about a few things that have been on my mind, that have been kind of in the news lately. One of them is this lady. I don't know if you saw this, but this lady is in Wisconsin, and this happened. I guess she works at a Cinnabon restaurant, she works at a Cinnabon, and she's not a fan of the Somali community, right? She's in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin and Minnesota, you have a lot of people from Somalia who are in the area. She's not a big fan of the Somalis. And I guess, they were at her Cinnabon, and there was some kind of argument, I guess. We don't know the full context. You got to be careful with these kind of clips. We don't really know the full context, but her name is Crystal Wilsey is her name. She works at a Cinnabon, or I guess worked at a Cinnabon in Wisconsin, and there were some people of Somalian descent who came up to the counter, and they were having an argument about whether or not women should wear headscarves. I don't know why she was arguing with them about that, right? Generally in service sector jobs, you don't engage with the customers about religion, about politics, things like that. You just kind of do your job. But I guess the customers were arguing with her about whether or not women should cover up the headscarves. These Somalis who were there were Muslims. Got a little heated. I will put the clip on, and then I will give you what I think about this, because my opinions, we continue to see cases like this. For some reason, they're happening in Minnesota and Wisconsin a lot. I don't know why, right? There was just the incident at the playground in Minnesota where the woman at the playground was, yelling at the kid who allegedly tried to steal from her. And I don't even know. I don't know why it's in Wisconsin. Maybe it's because of the Somali thing that's going on right now. I guess Trump is talking about the Somali migrants and all the people that have come to the United States, all the refugees from Somalia who've come to the United States. Ilhan Omar is from Somalia. For some reason, debate related to Somali migrants is hot right now in America. And I guess this woman is a white woman, and she works at Cinnabon, and she made the mistake of arguing, with these Somali migrants. And then she just decided to, get a little racist, not a little bit. This is what happened. This is the clip that is now floating around. I'm going to give you my opinion of the situation, which might shock you a little bit. I think if you're familiar with this channel, you know how what I will probably say, but many people, if you're new, I will give you my opinion. It's horrible what she does here, right? It's uncalled for, right? But, she was having this argument with her customers at Cinnabon. They pulled out their phones and filmed her, and then it escalated. This is what happened.
So idiot, for real. You are an idiot. No, I'm not racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. What's wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? Ugly? Talking about ugliness? Did I stutter? You think your body makes you a better person? Are you recording? I'm gonna record you. Yes. Do you want me to throw water on you or something? I would get the face with your recording. You better. Fuck out of here. No, I'm not racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. Don't be disrespectful. You ruin your life, by the way. Oh, you talking about respect? You're talking about respect? You are fired from this place, mother. Not be walking here. Hiding your fucking no, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. Because you know damn well you're a fucking respect. Evil. That's respect. That's respect. That's respect. Disrespect. Hey, keep pushing. Keep squeezing that caramel, bitch. Get the fuck out of here. That was meant for you.
Yeah, they edited out when she said the N-word. She did say the N-word a couple times. She said, "I am racist." You know, obviously not professional behavior. I mean, this is, pretty awful. So here's the thing. So we now find out the background of this woman. This is what always happens. So then the internet decided to make her infamous, which, I mean, okay. So now the clip is going around the internet, right? The clip is now going around the internet. We know her name is Crystal Wilsey. She's got a really long criminal record. She's been arrested for DUI a couple times, drinking while driving under the influence. She's been arrested for child endangerment. She has 3 children, and she was arrested for endangering them. Looks like she lost custody of them, and this is a woman who's done prison time. This is a woman who obviously has some big mental health issues. She's an ex-con. She's working a service sector job, and, some people at the job decided to have an argument with her and film it. And here's what's shitty about this whole situation. Okay. Like, first of all, if you've ever been in America, people like this exist, right? She's not rich. She's not, been elected the president of the women's association. She's not, an upstanding citizen. She's an ex-con, right? She is an ex-con. She is someone who has clearly had an alcoholism issue. She's someone who has done time in prison. She's lost custody of her children. She's not we're not dealing with, it's not like, yeah, that would be a scandal if she was the chief of police, right? That would be the scandal if she was, a teacher, right? That would be a scandal if she was, I don't know, if she was somebody that society looked up to. But she's generally somebody who's pretty low on the totem pole, so to speak, right? She is an ex-con. She's got a long criminal record, and she works in a service sector job. And it looks like she's not capable of maintaining professional behavioral standards, right? And, generally, if you work in a service sector job and you cannot refrain from referring to your customers by ethnic and racial slurs, you're going to lose your job. And of course, she lost her job. She's been fired. But here's the thing, right? So first of all, the people who made this clip have gotten a huge amount of attention for themselves. It's gone viral, right? This is what Trumpers are like. This is what Somalis have to deal with. They've made this about Trump, which I didn't see Trump in that video. Trump has nothing to do with this woman. And so this video is exploded across the internet as an example of Trumpers being racist. And this is why Trump is bad for hating the Somali community, etc. And now she has raised herself over $109,000 in a GoFundMe that she's raised for herself, right? That she says, see, they're canceling me for being racist. Yeah, you were pretty racist in the clip, my dear. You obviously are racist. So she's now raised $109,000. So the anti-Trump faction has made a huge amount of money out of this and has used this for propaganda purposes. She, on the other hand, has also made a lot of money out of this. And here we are, right? And the thing is, it's like, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, right? And that people like this exist. There are people with criminal records that are, low income white people who have long arrest records, who are very, are you surprised? Does it shock you that somebody in her life circumstances might be racist? Is that really shocking to you? Do you really think that a woman who has multiple arrests for alcohol-related crimes, a woman who has lost custody of her 3 children for child endangerment, has done time in prison, is working in a low-wage service sector job, are you shocked that she's, not politically correct? Are you shocked that she, it looks like she was provoked to some degree. She was behind the counter, right? Those people who came up to the counter and were having the argument with her about Islam or headscarves or whatever the hell they were arguing about. Are you shocked that someone in her life circumstances might hold racist views? I'm not. There are people like this in America. Whoop-de-doo. Are you shocked? Are you shocked that, such people do exist? I grew up around a lot of people like this. And it's awful. And she shouldn't have used the language that she used. And she shouldn't harbor racial hatred toward anybody. And, you know, I mean, you generally shouldn't treat customers like that. You just shouldn't treat anybody like that. Okay. So she's bad. I think society has pretty much agreed that she's bad, not just for what she did on the video there. We've all agreed that she's bad because she's an alcoholic who drinks and drives, because she lost custody of her children. She's been put in prison, and she's racist. Like, and so she got fired because you don't treat customers that way. Like, why is this national news? Who cares? Right? That's my question, is who cares? Who cares, right? The owner of the Cinnabon should care, because, you're not going to have a very successful business if you have people working for you who act that way. So she got fired. The people who experienced that in the restaurant, they cared. Well, they videoed it. And now they're making loads of money off their viral clip. It's all good for their social media. And actually, she's doing pretty well, right? She has now made $109,000, after, getting canceled for this on the internet. So, at this point, the whole situation is dumb. And it's turned into a situation where we basically farm racial. Yes, we're stoking racial division, right? Somebody who is not well, somebody with a criminal background is being farmed for content, basically. This is a money-making thing at this point, right? It's money-making. She made money off of it. Give Send Go made money off of it. The social media apparatus made money off of it. Everyone made money off it. So we found somebody who society has already, before she even did this, has basically decided she's a ne'er-do-well, right? She's an undesirable element, right? She's probably had a really tough life. I'll just be honest with you, right? I mean, I'm not trying to say that excuses anything she did, but it's like, for someone to be in this kind of situation where they've lost custody of their children for child endangerment. They have multiple arrests for DUI, right? They don't even have enough self-control to not act this way at their job, right? I mean, this is a person who's in a shitty life situation, and it's the ugly side of America. Such people exist, right? We have there are people in America that are bad, they have them in every country, right? You go to Mexico, I'm sure there are people there that are alcoholics involved in crime, say racial or ethnic or gender or bigoted things. I mean, it's like, I'm not sitting here highly, not sitting here highly, hold a second. I just got a very strange text. But anyway, I'm not sitting here, highly upset, or I just, the whole thing just shouldn't exist. Like, it shouldn't be on our radar screen. It just doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't matter. Right? I mean, it just, it doesn't serve any purpose for making our country in any way better. It doesn't serve any purpose for making our country better in any way. It just doesn't help anything for us to be talking about this woman. And, there's nothing particularly shocking about someone from her background, in her life situation, being bigoted. I'm not shocked by it at all. She sucks in a lot of ways. And I think she probably, and that's the sad thing, is when someone acts this way, she has very low self-esteem. I mean, think about it. Would you want to be her? Would you want to be somebody with multiple DUI criminal records? Would you want to be somebody who, would you want to be somebody who has, been, lost custody of their own children? for child endangerment. I mean, would you want to be somebody who has gone to prison for a really long time? I mean, she probably has very, very low self-esteem. I bet she was abused as a child. I'll bet you anything that there's abuse in her childhood record. I mean, that she's probably had a shitty life, and she's made some shitty choices in her life, no question about it. And that's that. Like, what more is there to say? She's made some shitty choices in her life. And, she made a shitty choice by making this video. Like, there's nothing particularly, and it's like case after case like this. Like, why are they throwing this in our face? This is supposed to trigger us. This is supposed to get us really, really mad, right? We're supposed to be really, really upset, right? And like, I would rather people not get really upset. I would rather that people, get along with each other. I'd rather people be nice to each other. I'd rather see humanity at its best rather than at its worst. And I look at this case and I just, people like her exist. And generally we see them and we go, ew, yuck, not interested. That's gross. That's generally the response. And that's that. I mean, and if you encounter somebody like this in real life, again, if it were a teacher, if it was a police officer, if it was an elected official, yeah. But if there's somebody who works at a Cinnabon who is a racist asshole, maybe if you feel if they're particularly rude and nasty, you can report it to the manager. Other than that, just move on. It's not the kind of thing, and that social media has gotten to this point where it rewards talking about this kind of garbage, and that is a problem. It's a bit of a problem. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that case, and I would urge people to avoid the trap. Avoid the trap of getting worked up about this kind of thing. I had a roommate years ago who got really, really upset, over something. And, he would get really, really upset over these kinds of cases, right? He would see a video of somebody doing something like this and he would get really, really worked up. And you have to just kind of make a conscious decision, that if a video like this goes viral, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm just not going to give it my attention because it doesn't really matter that much. It doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it's just kind of a dumb, gross thing. Period. End of discussion. That's that. Not much more to it. And I don't feel a desire to continue talking about it. Now, there's a couple other things I wanted to talk about, in addition to Crystal Wilsey. So Luigi Mangione had another court date. I don't know if people saw that. Luigi Mangione had a court date, and this is an evidentiary hearing. So the Luigi Mangione case is this young man is accused of murdering the CEO of United Healthcare, the health insurance corporation, and it is alleged that he murdered the head of United Healthcare. And what I have been saying about this case from the beginning is that something is off. Something is very, very off. The healthcare system in America is a ripoff, and healthcare should be available to all. I mean, a healthy society would go out of its way to make sure that healthcare is available to all because it's an investment. It is human labor power and human creativity that is the source of all wealth. And if there is human creativity and human labor power, it comes from human beings, and those human beings need to be healthy. And having a healthcare system to provide for those with medical problems, and having that healthcare system focus on prevention, not treating illness, but rather preventing illness and encouraging people to have a healthy lifestyle, to eat healthily, to exercise, to that's just kind of basic. And that we don't have that in America. We have a healthcare for profit system where insurance companies make money by denying care and denying coverage to people, where, private drug companies make money by, overprescribing different drugs. All the kids are on drugs these days. There's crisis of opioid addiction because doctors were pushed to overprescribe opioids. There's just a big problem. Our medical care for profit system is a complete mess. It is. And this is something that people on the progressive left, like socialists, have been trying to talk about for years, right? For years, that was one of the main things that people like Bernie Sanders and even communists and leftists, that was what they would talk about, was that we need to have what they have in most countries in the world, which is a system where healthcare is provided. In Britain, they have the National Health Service, which is a government system of doctors and hospitals. In Canada, they have a system that is called universal single payer, where the government is the insurance company. There's one insurance company, it's the government. The hospitals are private, but the government covers it. In various countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism, you have healthcare systems that have been created in the process of having an overall planned economy. The Cuban healthcare system is widely admired. Cuban doctors are sent all over the world to provide medical aid. There are many different responses to it, but the response and the way healthcare is handled in America as a private for-profit endeavor is having disastrous results, and it's a disaster. And many people were big supporters of Bernie Sanders in 2016 because he said he was going to address that issue. And we know that the 2016 Democratic primary was stolen from Bernie Sanders, that the party leadership conspired to prevent the medical care that Bernie Sanders needed from being made available. And that was that. And many people wanted Bernie Sanders. Probably the majority of Democrats wanted Bernie Sanders because he said he would address the medical issue. And Bernie Sanders was not named as the candidate. And so then what do we have? What's the situation? What results from all of this? Well, you have a situation where you have the Medicare for All marches. Do you remember the Medicare for All marches? Where after Trump was elected, there started to be a movement demanding Medicare for all. And you started to have protests around the issue of Medicare for all. And immediately, the Medicare for all marches were condemned as fascist, as class reductionist, as white supremacist. And in fact, there was one march in Indiana where one person who had formerly been a Nazi was participating. And, then this was discovered and they were banned from the march. And that became the focus. And all across the country, all the woke people started saying the Medicare for All marches are fascist and white supremacist and, they're all awful. And then after that, during the pandemic, Jimmy Dore raised the idea that they should force the vote. And that instead of agreeing to have Nancy Pelosi be Speaker of the House, that the squad, the Bernie Sanders supporting squad, AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and they should demand that there be an up-down vote on whether or not we adopt a Medicare for All system. And Jimmy Dore said, let's force the vote. And the response to Jimmy Dore was he was declared to be an evil person. And the Young Turks went after Jimmy Dore. Everyone went after Jimmy Dore. The fact that Jimmy Dore would dare want there to be a force the vote. I mean, I have never seen anything like it. All of the left, all of the Bernie Sanders supporters, all the socialists, all the social media of the left went after Jimmy Dore like you wouldn't believe. How dare he call for forcing the vote around Medicare for All? So the Medicare for All marches were not acceptable. Force the vote, demanding a parliamentary procedure around healthcare, that was unacceptable. And now fast forward to 2024, at the end of 2024, last year, about a year ago, somebody went and murdered a CEO, an executive, and even before they caught the alleged killer, immediately the very same voices that were not okay with Medicare for all marches, that were not okay with force the vote, started celebrating. Woo! Yes, we love murder. We love murder. So parliamentary procedures are not okay. Protests and demonstrations are not okay. Bernie Sanders was not allowed to be the nominee of the Democratic Party in 2016, and it was rigged against him. But murder, assassination, that's awesome. What in the world is going on here? And as somebody who has seen how toxic the woke left is, this is just another example of how intelligence controlled and insane the woke left really is. That if you try to organize a real movement, they cancel you. If you try to demand a parliamentary procedure, they cancel you. But if you murder someone, allegedly, like Luigi Mangione has done, you're immediately a celebrity. Folks, Luigi Mangione has not yet been convicted of the crime. Luigi Mangione is maintaining his innocence. But there is a whole social media apparatus of people that say, one, they believe he did it, and two, they think it's absolutely awesome that he did it. And they're cheering for it. Something's off. Something's a bit off. And I said this at the time, and I saw these people cheering for Luigi Mangione, and I said no. And I said what used to be kind of common sense. Marxists for years said that left adventurism and terrorism is not the proper response to a political crisis. The way to get Medicare and the way to increase workers' wages, the way to advance the struggles of working people is with a movement, building a mass movement, not with murder, not with lone wolf acts of terrorism and violence. That we are in favor of a mass movement. Dr. Martin Luther King, he did not win civil rights for African Americans by going out and murdering people. He did it by building a mass movement. And there were times where that mass movement, even though Dr. Martin Luther King himself didn't approve, did take up arms to defend themselves. But it wasn't random assassinations. It was, Robert F. Williams, when they were marching to integrate swimming pools and the Klan was shooting at their rallies, they had the Deacons for Defense protect their civil rights rallies with firearms. That's respectable, right? Self-defense, right? You have the right to not be killed. There were times that, the Black Panthers did their armed patrols, but again, it wasn't random assassinations. It was, practicing their right to bear arms and protecting the Black community from police brutality. But while it is one thing to believe that people have the right to defend themselves and that people have the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, lone wolf assassinations are not something that is promoted. That generally the understanding of all serious mass organizers is that you don't want random assassinations, violence, and chaos. You want a mass movement of people to demand justice. And you want groups of people that learn to work together and learn through the process of struggle how to organize. That's what was said. And that used to be common sense, but it was ignored. And Luigi Mangione, they're already making a mini-series film about his life. He hasn't even been convicted of the crime yet. And they're already making a documentary film about what a hero he is. His face is blasted everywhere. The whole thing stinks. It stinks. And honestly, I am not sure that he actually did it. There are some questions that I have. One question being, we're to believe that this guy is so intelligent. What he allegedly did is no simple deed. It's not a simple crime, right? He apparently is accused of going into Manhattan, which is one of the most widely surveilled areas in the entire country. And going into Manhattan and then finding a high-profile individual, an important corporate executive, finding where he was, which is, again, not an easy thing to do, right? But apparently early hours of the morning. He figured out where a high-profile healthcare CEO was. He then shot the guy, allegedly, with a homemade firearm that he made himself that had a silencer on it. He didn't just allegedly make a homemade gun. He made a homemade gun with a homemade silencer on the gun, killed the guy, and then managed to flee from the city and leave the city of Manhattan, leave New York City, and get all the way to Altoona, Pennsylvania. And then in Altoona, Pennsylvania, the story goes that he hung out in McDonald's, and somebody at the McDonald's thought he looked like the image that was floating around of the murderer. They called the police. The police came to the McDonald's, and they searched his bag, and they found the gun and the silencer and the manifesto, and that's how they caught him. I'm really having a hard time with this one. Really having a hard time with it. And it just so happens he's a really good-looking guy. Just so happens he himself is from a very, very wealthy background. And something's off. And so the recent court proceeding, he had an evidentiary hearing. And the defense, they argued that it should be thrown out because the police had no warrant to go through his backpack. And where they found the gun and the manifesto, that they did that without a warrant. That's their argument. Very interesting. That's their argument. On top of that, they've pointed out that this bit of writing that was immediately leaked to the press to make him a hero, this bit of writing that he did, they're saying it should not be referred to as a manifesto because he never released it publicly, right? There's no evidence he ever wanted the world to read what he wrote, but they made it public. And that they're objecting to the way a trial would proceed. That, the trial would proceed on the basis of the gun and silencer found in his bag. It would proceed on the basis of, the writings in his notebook or whatever. And those things were acquired without a warrant. They looked into his bags without proper cause. It was an illegal search of his bag. Okay. But I'm just telling you, this case is highly, highly unhealthy, and it is made for TV. And that's what makes me suspicious, right? If this guy had been ugly, no one would care. If this guy had randomly killed somebody that wasn't related to the healthcare system, no one would care. But this was almost immediately designed to be a case that would hit the front page. And the algorithms immediately exploded with the left saying this guy is a hero. He's guilty, which we don't know that he actually did it. And he's a hero, and we love him for what he did. And he's our man. We love him for carrying out this act of alleged murder. That's something's off. And again, it's one of those cases where it's like you have to make a conscious effort. And this is what I've been telling people. It gets back to our whole thing about living biologically. If we are actually going to change the world, we cannot be manipulated by social media, right? Just like we shouldn't care and we shouldn't get fired off and fly off the handle about, Crystal Wilson, giving the middle finger. We shouldn't join the Luigi fan club either. We shouldn't because that's what they want us to do. And, Crystal Wilson is not the biggest threat to public health. She's a racist woman who works at a Cinnabon, or used to. And, Luigi Mangione is not the vanguard hero of the revolution. I'm just telling you that. If he did what he did, he is a lone wolf assassin. He's a left adventurous terrorist. That's what he is, right? If that's what actually happened. But we are being told that what we should care about is this woman in the Cinnabon. What we should care about is Luigi Mangione. and we are being inoculated against joining mass movements. I wrote a book immediately after the celebration of the murder. It was called The Danger of an American Years of Lead. I originally called it The Killing of Brian Thompson and the Danger of an American Years of Lead. Amazon would not let me publish it under that title, so I just gave it this title. I took the Brian Thompson CEO name out of it, and I just called it The Danger of an American Years of Lead. That's all I called it. That's what I called it. And at that point, the book was out there, and I said, this is dangerous because they are psyching up the public to engage in murder. The public is being psyched up to think that killing people, murdering people is a good thing. Killing people and murdering people is not a good thing. And that we are already living in a period of political violence, and that political violence in America is becoming more and more the norm. And this is very, very bad. And since I wrote this, the killing of Charlie Kirk has happened. The lighting on fire of congressmen's homes, the murder of, and everything that I wrote, I warned you that this strategy for the years of lead, that's Italy. Italy in the 1960s and 70s experienced a period called the years of lead. And I argued that we're experiencing an attempt to foment a years of lead in America, because the years of lead in Italy was not accidental. It was the work of intelligence. That Italy was on the verge of leaving NATO. And to keep Italy in NATO, you had a wave of insane, crazed bombing and killing, with communists killing other communists, communists killing fascists, fascists killing communists, fascists killing other fascists. And that even though the public wanted to leave NATO, and even though there was even talk of a coalition government between the Christian Democratic Party and the Communist Party to get Italy out of NATO, the Italian public was overruled because dissent was diffused by fomenting a crazed, deranged political culture with lots of assassinations and killings. And that Italian politics in the Cold War was not accidental. It was the result of Operation Gladio. The CIA manipulated Italian politics, funded communist red brigades, funded fascist groups, manipulated Italian politics to the point that Italy was not really a sovereign country, and the pro-US, anti-Soviet, pro-NATO government of Italy remained intact. And I would argue that the powers that be in America are trying to foment a culture of political violence because it's the only way they can stay in power. They don't want Medicare for all marches. They don't want force the vote. They don't want a real movement to emerge that would demand things like health care and an end to the wars. What they want is Luigi Mangione. They want a years of lead. They want violence and killing and instability and chaos where no one knows who's on what side. Everyone's weary. Everyone's angry at everybody else. Everyone's suspicious of everybody else. And as a result, they stay in power. And in the book, I quote extensively from counterinsurgency strategists. I quote William S. Lind, the Pentagon strategist, the father of the surge in Iraq, right? And I quote him as saying that the way you defeat an insurgency is not with a direct confrontation. And that he compares it to David and Goliath. And he says, that if an insurgent group goes to war with an occupying army or with the state, it's a lot like David and Goliath. And that for the last 5,000 years, that whenever they tell the story of David and Goliath, everyone pretty much sympathizes with David and not with Goliath. and that the state army has so much power and military force in comparison to the insurgents or the dissidents that people just naturally sympathize with the insurgents, even if the insurgents are completely wrong. They see the insurgents as the underdogs. And that the way to properly wage a counterinsurgency is not to mobilize the state apparatus against the insurgents, but rather to make it confusing. And that basically they've learned what the years of lead in Italy was that rather than having David fight Goliath, and then everyone would side with David, they had Goliath stand back, and they created 5 or 10 different Davids who then fought each other. And sometimes they would help one David, and sometimes they would help another David. And the Davids got to be pretty violent as they fought each other. And Goliath just stood back and said, what's wrong with you guys? Why can't we all just get along? And the Davids got more and more vicious as they attacked each other. And no one could tell who the real David was. For a while, it looked like maybe this guy was the real David. Then it looked like this guy was the real David. And the Davids are just sitting there and fighting with each other. And Goliath, he might be big and strong, but he's just standing back, watching. And after a while, the public gets tired of the Davids that are all fighting each other, and no one knows who's on what side and all that. And Goliath just kind of wins by default. And that's the art of counterinsurgency. And that's what they did in Northern Ireland to defeat the Provisional Irish Republican Army. That's what was done in Jamaica during the 70s and 80s. There was a fight. You had Michael Manley was the elected president, and Jamaica deteriorated into a mess of political violence with shower posse and different gangs fighting each other. And it was all being covertly directed by the CIA. The shower posse gang was trained by the CIA, and they gave them military training and weapons. They sent them to Jamaica to carry out political assassinations. And that a way to diffuse dissent, it's a really, really common tactic to diffuse dissent, is you just make it confusing. You just make it very, very confusing. And then the status quo, even if it's unpopular, will win by default because the dissidents look crazy and divided and confused, and you win by default. And this is Frank Kitson, the British intelligence officer who waged the fight against the Mau Mau Land and Freedom Army in Kenya. He wrote Gangs and Counter Gangs. And that was the similar way they defeated the Mau Mau Land and Freedom Army in Kenya, was that they created counter gangs, groups of people that looked like Mau Mau liberation fighters, but were actually working for the British, that would gather intelligence, that would confuse people. And towards the end of the Kenyan War, you couldn't tell who was actually the real resistance forces fighting the British. There were so many counter gangs going around. It was so confusing that the British Empire was able to win. And that this is the counterinsurgency strategy. And that they talk about it very, very openly, right? Brzezinski, Frank Kitson, William S. Lind, they talk about this, that in Vietnam, the reason the Vietnamese National Liberation Front won was it was very clear. Are you for the status quo, the French colonial government, the Western puppet regime, or are you for the communists? And people were very unhappy, and so the communists won. And it took a long time, but the Americans came in to back up the French-installed government, and they had huge amounts of firepower and force, but the whole world very much sympathized with the Vietnamese. They were the peasants fighting against the foreign occupier. The population gradually, more and more, came over to the side of the Vietnamese, and eventually the USA got bogged down, and eventually the Vietnamese won because it was very straightforward. Who's on what side? It was very straightforward. There was one solid opposition, the National Liberation Front of Vietnam, and there was a status quo that was very unpopular, and they created a polarization. That's a really important word, polarization. It's an important factor in any revolution or really any war, is what you call polarization, right? In order to have a war, you got to have two sides. There's a dualistic and contradictory nature to war. And if you're going to have a war in which one side wins, there has to be a clear polarization of who's on both sides. Frank Kitson, in his writings, he argued that every society at all times is somewhere on a sliding scale of, between outright civil war and, and stability. And that he says that there is one stage of what you call subversion, where there are people who exist within society that are against the government, against the prevailing system. They are subversive. But subversion leads to what he calls terrorism. Now, he uses the word terrorism a little bit differently. He argues that if you have a mass movement capable of forcing concessions and exercising power within society, that's terrorism. And that terrorism is when you have subversive forces that are strong enough that they lead and control masses of people, they control regions, they're able to force the government to do things. He calls that terrorism. And then he argues that eventually, if terrorism persists long enough, you get civil war, when the existing state fractures and some side with the insurgents and some maintain the power structure, and you have an actual civil war in society. And that it's a 3-scale point. And it's funny because Mao Zedong, in his writing on guerrilla warfare, he makes a similar argument. He talks about strategic defensive, strategic equilibrium, and strategic offensive. And that, you have a period where, strategic defensive is when the revolutionary forces are very weak, when they function on the margins of society. But then you have strategic equilibrium, where the revolutionary forces control huge swaths of territory, and they are contending with the power structure, and they control the countryside basically, and they're able to control, and block, what goes in and out of cities, etc. And then the third stage is strategic offensive, where the revolutionary forces move in and take the cities. Right. And this is the protracted People's War, or the rural People's War strategy that Mao Zedong developed as a military fighting style. First, you set up base area in the countryside. Eventually, the base areas expand to the point that you have what's called strategic equilibrium, which is the base areas in the countryside, and the areas that the revolutionaries control are so big that they are able to extract concessions, and they control big chunks of the country. It's like dual power. And then they move into the third stage of struggle, where they take the cities and become the government. And that's how revolutionary crises operate. And what is going on right now is that our leaders in the United States realize that right now there is widespread subversion. More subversion in America than there has been really since the early 1970s. People don't like the government. People don't like the wars. People don't like their economic conditions. People don't trust mainstream media. There's more subversion in America than ever before. But as of yet, that subversion has not really translated into political power. Now, Donald Trump has certainly tapped into some subversive sentiments in order to gain political power. And Bernie Sanders, to some degree or other, also tapped into some subversive sentiments to gain political power. But both of them function within the prevailing system, right? Trump is not trying to overthrow the system, and neither was Bernie Sanders. Both of them have just kind of tapped into the sentiments among the wider population, the subversive sentiments of the wider population to gain power. But there is no mass subversive movement that is capable of gaining power and extracting anything from the government. And there hasn't been such a movement in the United States really since the 1930s. It wasn't except in the 1930s, when you had the strong labor movement, the industrial unions, the Communist Party, they were able to force the government to give them what they wanted. And Roosevelt entered a strategic alliance with the communists, and the communists and their anti-fascist Popular Front were able to really represent a big section of the population and get major concessions from society. Roosevelt aligned himself with the Soviet Union, with the communists. He passed the Wagner Act for labor unions. He created Social Security and unemployment insurance and hired millions of Americans with the Works Progress Administration. You had a situation in the late 1930s where you were entering some kind of strategic equilibrium, the beginning stages of that, where communism as a political movement in America, labor unions, anti-fascist groups, etc., had enough influence that they were changing government policy. And, Gus Hall talked about how during the steel strike in war in Ohio, the Union basically took control of the city, and it was almost like trench warfare, and how, the police chief had to get a pass from the communist-controlled Union to walk down the street even, and that it was, in some places, you had almost dual power. But that was pretty quickly gotten rid of by, during the Second World War, the communists very much had to de-escalate any class struggle and focus on defeating fascism. And then after the Second World War, the FBI and the federal government just went in and crushed the communist and Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party, not just the communists, but their allies among the Democrats, the Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party. And you had a situation where that was gotten rid of. And during the 1960s, you had a widespread Black liberation movement, and you had widespread subversion among young Americans who didn't want to fight in Vietnam. You didn't really ever have any territory. There wasn't a mass base that ever developed for some kind of anti-imperialist movement. And we're in a time now where the sentiments among the population are very, very widespread. And we really could, I believe, build a mass movement that would be capable of moving the United States away from imperialism. I am at the point where, folks, I made a post about this. I'm not interested in talking about communism anymore. And it's hard for me. It's really hard for me because for me, my whole political identity was being a communist. My life was, I was a young person, and I was told that communism just didn't work anywhere. Communism just failed everywhere it's ever been tried. And I found out that that was not true. And I was angry about that. I found out that the Soviet Union had huge economic successes and industrialized and became a superpower. And I was angry about that. So I sought out communist groups. I wanted to get involved. And I joined one communist group, and then I joined another communist group. I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years. And for me, it was always about standing with the countries that are under attack. I supported Iraq, and I opposed the U.S. invasion of Iraq. I supported Iran. I supported Venezuela. I supported Cuba. I supported North Korea. And that I always saw myself as being on the side of those countries that the USA attacks, because the lies the U.S. government tells about those countries are infuriating to justify the wars. And the reason those countries are under attack is they've broken out of the imperialist system and they've begun to build themselves up with planned economies. And that was my understanding of what socialism and communism meant. Communism, as I understood it, right? There was the philosophy of dialectical materialism, there was Marx and all that. But my understanding of it was that capitalism has entered this monopolistic stage of imperialism, and there are countries around the world that have broken out of that system in order to build themselves up, and that eventually we want to do the same thing here. We want to defeat imperialism. And if people ask me what communism was, I'd say the world's ruled by big banks and corporations, and there are countries around the world that have kicked them out and started building themselves up and developing, and we ought to do the same thing here. Our real enemy is at home. That's what it meant to me. And for a long time, I could just tell people that, and that's what it meant to me. There were always some issues, though. For example, I mean, the biggest issue that I had with the communist movement, the first sign that something was wrong was Libya. 2011, Libya, I viewed Libya as a great example of an anti-imperialist socialist country led by Gaddafi. They broke out of Western imperialism. They industrialized. They took control of their oil resources. They gave funds to the Black Panthers. They gave funds to all kinds of people struggling against imperialism. They built the world's largest irrigation system. I viewed Libya as a great example of an anti-imperialist country. And almost all the communist groups supported the revolution to bring down Gaddafi that was engineered by the United States. I can count on my hand the communist organizations that stood with Libya. Ramsey Clark, the Workers' World Party, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. But even among them, there was so little support. I was in the Workers' World Party at the time, and they went out of their way to denounce Libya as not really a socialist country, as a bourgeois nationalist regime. And I read the Green Book by Gaddafi, and I said, this is a socialist country. They broke out of imperialism. They've planned their economy. They're struggling. And we can point to Libya, which has the highest life expectancy on the African continent, as a great example of what we're trying to build when we struggle against imperialism. But they said no. Gaddafi is a bourgeois nationalist. It's not really socialist. Libya is, no. Libya is no good. Libya, it's Islamic socialism, and they oppress women, and all this stuff. I mean, Libya had some of the best rights for women in that region. They were very advanced in terms of women's rights compared to other countries in the region. It wasn't perfect, but they were far ahead of many of their neighbors. And it was like they just couldn't bring themselves to stand with Libya. But Alex Jones supported Libya. Cynthia McKinney supported Libya. There were a lot of people that were on the so-called right wing or the conspiracy crowd who saw that Libya was trying to build an independent African bank, and they supported Libya. But the left just couldn't support Gaddafi. And the ones who did, they did it in a half-ass weak way. And I was just horrified. And then with the rise of Bernie Sanders, come around 2013, 2014, all of a sudden there's a new wave of people. Socialism and communism is really interesting to people, but it has nothing to do with anti-imperialism. The first thing they say about any of the socialist countries is, well, that's not real socialism. That's not real communism, right? And I suddenly was being accused of being a fascist. I was a fascist. Why was I a fascist? Well, you admire brutal regimes and dictators, and you're always talking about economics. I don't hear you calling out races. I don't hear you calling out LGBT. And it was like, if you raised economic populist demands, trying to break out of the imperialist system, if you advocated, against imperialism and supported the countries that were struggling against imperialism, you were a fascist. And I was immediately declared to be a fascist. And I was like, how am I a fascist? It was always my understanding that, you stand with those who are struggling against imperialism. And that, no, we're not fighting for, transgender bathrooms. No, we're not fighting for people to end their speeches with pronouns. No, we're not fighting for Black Lives Matter. We're fighting to defeat imperialism. We're fighting to defeat imperialism. The Black people are a colonized people within U.S. borders. They have a right to choose integration or separation for themselves, right? We are hoping to mobilize the American people for a government that will stand up against the big banks and monopolies, the same big banks and monopolies that are driving global war. And that was my understanding. I was an anti-imperialist, and I wanted a society where the banks, factories, and industries and the centers of economic power function to serve public good and not the profits of the wealthy few. And I wanted to defeat this system of global monopolies that were dominating the world and keeping the world poor. That's what imperialism meant to me. That's what it meant to me to be a communist. Now there are lots of people in America who think they are communists, and they don't believe anything like this. They do not believe this. They believe that we need to have worker cooperatives and that all companies should be run by employee stock ownership programs. They believe that America all the white people should be kicked out of America and it should be given back to Native Americans because we're all on stolen land. They believe that violence and killing is really awesome and they want to burn down this country and tear it down, burn it down. I don't know. They believe all kinds of crap. It has nothing to do with what I believe, right? I am saying we need to defeat imperialism. I am saying we need an economy that serves the people, not the profits of a wealthy few. I am saying that, countries around the world like Libya, like China, like Russia, like Iran should be supported, and that we need to defeat imperialism right here. That's what I'm saying. And I don't know what these people are saying. These people are saying, death to the traditional family. These people are saying, they're saying all kinds of crazy stuff that has nothing to do with what I believe. And they think I'm a fascist. And these people also hate all the governments. They say China is fascist. They say Russia is fascist. They say Iran is fascist. They hate all the countries. So I'm here in a situation where my beliefs have not changed. My beliefs have not changed, but they've changed. While at the same time, I realize that Marxism-Leninism, the classic Soviet style, that's the past, right? In Russia, the leader of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov, is an Orthodox Christian, and he loves the Orthodox Church. He believes it should be the state religion of Russia. In Iran, they have broken out of imperialism, like Gaddafi. They have a planned economy with government-run banks and industries, but it's done in the name of Christianity, and also Also, the way China started to be in the late 1970s with the market reforms, that's what these countries are. Venezuela has a very low rate of state ownership. Very little is owned by the government in Venezuela. The oil is run by the government, and government oil money subsidizes many private businesses. There's not a very big government sector. The Soviet model of the government running everything, 91% state ownership like they had in the USSR, that is not coming back. The Soviet Union moved away from it for a reason. The Soviet Union was overthrown for a reason. China has been successful for a reason. Vietnam is successful for a reason. Cuba and North Korea would like to be more like Vietnam and would like to be more like China. And that countries that break out of imperialism have planned economies. They have a government that comes out of an anti-colonial revolution. But they plan the economy, and that planned economy includes a lot of businesses, a lot of private businesses, a lot of markets, etc. And that's the system that I want, right? I want a government of action to fight for working families, to break the power of the big monopolies, and to invest in people, in communities, in families, in neighborhoods, right? I want a government that is pro-humanity and pro-growth. That's what I want. And that's what communist governments around the world today believe in. You go to Nicaragua, the slogan is Christianity, Socialism, and Solidarity. They have a micro-entrepreneurship program that subsidizes worker cooperatives, that provides healthcare and jobs, right? You go to Iran, you go to China, like that's the new system, right? It's an anti-colonial government that controls the economy, but they control it in a way that allows the market to flourish. That's the point. Whereas in the West, we have the rule of big monopolies, huge multinational corporations that are propped up by the government that impoverish people. That's what we got. That's what we got. So, for years, I considered my views to be communist. But at this point, there's a lot of people in America who think they're communists, and they don't believe this. And there's a lot of people that are where I'm at. They are opposed to the wars. They are opposed to the FBI. They want economic development, and they think their greatest enemy is communism. And they think communism is what they're fighting against. It's all muddled up and messed up. And so at this point, I don't want to argue with people about what words mean. It becomes worthless. I have nothing to gain by going around and arguing with people about what communism really means. Who cares? Who cares what communism really means? I know what I'm for. I'm against globalism, imperialism. I am for humanity. I am pro-family. I am pro-working people. I am pro-development. I want a government that invests in people. I want a public bank, a national bank that will inject credit into communities. I want public ownership of our natural resources and our natural wealth. I want paved roads and a new mass development program to rebuild America. I want an economic bill of rights so we invest in our people by providing healthcare and jobs and education. And I don't care what you call that. I call it innovationism because it is a way to have a government that prioritizes human creativity and human innovation, which is the source of all wealth in this world. That is what I'm for. That's what the Center for Political Innovation is for. We are for a government of action that fights for working families. We are pro-humanity. We are pro-growth, pro-community. That's what we're for. And we're building a movement to advocate for it. And, this weekend, we had a great moment. Our members in LA, they went to a Hands Off Venezuela rally. They were actually featured on television, right? I'll put that on. It was very, very great. Our members out in LA, they appeared on local TV, to talk about why we don't need a war in Venezuela. This was our members out in LA. They're always doing outreach. This was Dan and Ishmael and all of them out in LA saying no war with Venezuela.
This is Dan, Now Man, Nice Wonder, here in Pershing Square, downtown Los Angeles, for the Hands Off Venezuela, No War with Venezuela rally. They're getting ready to march in a minute, and it looks to be like maybe 1,000 people here or so, and we're going to talk to a couple people along the way.
Yes. Paulo,
What are your thoughts about getting hands off Venezuela?
Was supported to come out. I'm the co-founder of Los Renderos de las Redes, a proven collective here organizing in the diaspora in the United States. So we're all organizing around Venezuela at this current time because this is an issue critical now, not just beyond just the Caribbean, but also all over in Latin America. And so we're out here with the as a coalition here for Venezuela in solidarity right now because we are approaching to war because of U.S. aggression in this month in December.
Are you here today?
Oh, hey everyone, yeah, I'm here because I don't want war with Venezuela. Like actually, and like war with just like in Venezuela, like I mean, it's bad in and of itself, but it would set a negative precedent because the establishment, they want to turn Venezuela into the Gaza of Latin America, and that would be horrifying. Like we wouldn't want a Gaza anywhere. Like the massacre and siege of Gaza should stop too also.
Right. What do you think about U.S. interests in Venezuela's oil? Do you think that has a lot to do with it?
Yeah, and apparently, Venezuela also has other valuable resources, like minerals. I mean, I'm not an expert. I was hearing about it on an episode of The Last American Vagabond. That's a good source to follow, by the way, for news issues and current events, including on Palestine and freedom-related issues, also on domestic issues too.
Right. Thank you very much, Joey.
Thank you.
Now at 10, a nationwide outcry against President Trump's threats of attacks against Venezuela and controversial attacks on boats in the Caribbean. During an appearance at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said President Trump could use the U.S. military as he sees fit.
Demonstrators in downtown L.A. this afternoon loudly disagree with that idea. Jillian Smuckler joining us live from Hollywood tonight with more on that story. Jillian.
Hi, Rick and Karine. Yeah, hundreds of people gathered in downtown Los Angeles today, joining a nationwide call to stop U.S. military action in Venezuela. And protesters tell us they're trying to send a message not only to the White House, but also to the world. People in more than 60 cities nationwide are rallying in what they call a last-ditch push to stop what they fear is a new U.S. war.
One, proxy war after another, and people are just tired of it.
What is it all for? It's all for money. It's all for greed.
In L.A. County, protesters say the Trump administration's escalating strikes in the Caribbean and new comments from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are clear warnings of a much larger conflict ahead.
We've been bombing fishing boats that, supposedly have drug traffickers on them, but it's really not about drug trafficking. It's about oil and economics.
The National Day of Action targets the administration's recent military campaign, including 22 strikes on alleged drug boats since September.
Yeah, that's our members out there in LA. They were on local television representing the hands-off Venezuela position. I think that's really, really tremendous. We have a great group of people at the Center for Political Innovation. And we are building this movement, and we go out. We've distributed thousands of copies of our book about the Houthis. We have conventions, we have events. We've done so much this year. We had an outreach campaign aimed at people that lost their food stamps. We had a convention, right? Here's the video from our convention that was quite successful. Yeah, it's great stuff. I mean, we've got a good organization. It's doing good stuff. And we're having our big event coming up January 11th in New Jersey. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Everyone who comes will be able to have a lovely buffet. You'll get a copy of the proceedings book of our convention that we had. It's going to be an absolutely awesome event in New Jersey. So please come to the event. Please register. We do need people to attend. It's going to be one of those events where we want to gather as many people together as possible. That's the idea. And it's going to be absolutely tremendous. So I hope to see you there at our event on the 11th of January. A few people have registered. Quite a few people have registered already, and we're doing everything we can, providing transportation in the New York City, New Jersey area. It's going to be a great event. So, that's what we got going on. So why don't we do the roll call? And we got a few questions that have come in. I'll answer those questions and we'll go from there. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Red Axis in Ottawa. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Jacob in Pensacola, Florida. Ryan in Kansas City. John McCarthy in Chicago. Good to see you. Jane in New Zealand. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. We got Grandpa in Tennessee. Good to see you, Grandpa. All right. Is somebody's grandfather, I guess. Well, is that him with the grandkids? Are those the grandkids in the picture there? It's great. We got Jacob in Wisconsin, right? We got Miralem in Bosnia and Herzegovina. All right. We got Brooklyn in the house. Phil, good to see you. Good to see you, Phil. We got Lee Arjen in Liverpool. We got St. David's, Bermuda. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? We got Dan in the LA area. We got the south coast of Alex in Brazil. That's Noah, by the way. He's our good guy, our member out in Massachusetts. Names and locations. Names and locations. Hello, I'm Rachel in Milwaukee. Solidarity. Good to meet you, mate. Good to meet you, Rachel. Good to meet you, Rachel. Good to have you here. Good to have you here. We have been through quite a bit this year, and it's been a great year. I am working on my New Year's message that comes out shortly after Christmas. A couple days after Christmas, I do my end of the year report, and it is, we have done a lot this year. We have done a whole lot this year. Should be good. I'm looking forward to it. We're off to a great start, an epic start. Stoke-on-Trent, England. All right. David in San Jose, California. Good to see you, David. Good to see you, David. Anybody else? Going once? All right. Well, listen, we got a couple buy me a coffees, 3 actually, 2 from John, 1 from Penny. Anybody else wants to send any questions? Questions are appreciated. Questions can be sent via buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. Best way to send questions. Buy me a coffee, Caleb Maupin. You can also do Rumble rants. And you can also Cash App me. Oh, Gabby in Chicago, one of our members in Chicago. Very, very good. You can also Cash App me. Caleb Maupin 22. You can Rumble rant, but the best way to send a question is to buy me a coffee. So Penny says they've got a wireless freight train in China. A wireless freight train in China. That's one thing I like about Penny is she stays on top of the positive news, right? There's a lot of negative news, but if you look at the parts of the world that have broken out of globalism, imperialism, they have optimistic, positive news. I know Penny's working on kind of a timeline of all the things that have been achieved by the great African leader, Ibrahim Traore. You know, and I'm really excited to see that timeline. And this is a wireless train in China. Let's put it on. Wireless train in China. A wireless train in China. Here we go. Here we go. And after that, she had another video. Hold on. Where is the wireless train in China? All right, here we go. People have joked that in CPI, we love trains a lot, right? Like, for example, I'll put a picture on, this is the back of the, this was the poster or the banner that we had for our convention this summer, the special banner that we had made. I'll put an image of it on the screen and you'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, we are all about trains. I want to get a shot that has the full banner on it, but you know, like, hold on, hold your horses, hold your horses. Let me find a good shot to put on the screen. We are all about trains, and I'll tell you why, but it's become kind of a joke, you know, that, you know, our pamphlet, Do You Believe in Growth, has a lot of trains on the cover of it. Our pamphlet, What is Innovationism, has a giant train on the cover of it. And this was the banner that we used for the convention this summer, right? Where it's long live the great unity of the people, and we have trains, right? And it's train routes going across the Eurasian hemisphere, right? And we're working on a very, very great banner, you know, for the new event that we're having. We're having a new banner made for the event in New Jersey. I haven't seen a draft of it yet, but our marketing team is working on it. It's going to be really tremendous. Trains are optimistic. They go fast. They're like a symbol of development, right? I really like trains, and it's become kind of something that we can point to. The Chinese government has invested a lot in train technology, high-speed railway, and it's something that we have kind of used as a symbol for CPI. I mean, I wrote a book years ago called Getting Rich Without Capitalism, and it had trains on the cover of it. And, you know, the train is a beautiful, beautiful symbol. But here, this is also, Penny also wanted me to put on the video of, she calls it European Union Jingle Bells. So here we go. So there you go. So that was at the end there. So that's Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and that slogan, for those of you who don't know, CCCP in Russian, those are the initials of the Soviet Union, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, right? You know, and that's a Soviet Union T-shirt, and that's Russian President Putin then. And that, yeah, I mean, right now the European Union, they've run out of money for Ukraine, and Trump is demanding they sign this peace deal. He's disappointed with Zelensky. He hasn't read it. I mean, yeah, I'm not getting into all of that too much on these streams. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to get into too much of the nitty gritty of that because it changes every day. And honestly, what I say on here could impact how things turn out, to tell you the truth, right? So, I feel like everything about the negotiations and all that needs to be said very, very carefully. And on these streams, I just kind of talk off the cuff, right? I just, and I could get something wrong, right? And that could have a really big impact because people watch these streams. And I don't want to mess things up by getting something wrong. So that's why I haven't been getting into the nitty gritty of what looks like. It looks like there could really be a peace deal soon. I'm really, really hoping that is the case. Now, John's question that he sent in is, he said, Scott Ritter is very optimistic about the new national security strategy. I am too. It looks great. Right? I mean, it's acknowledging certain things about NATO expansionism. And I mean, it's, trying to undermine the logic of NATO. I mean, it's that new security strategy. That's a really great sign. There keep being really great signs, but it ain't over till it's over. It ain't over till it's over. This war needs to end. This war absolutely needs to end. And I'm glad. I mean, Scott, if anybody knows about it, it's Scott, right? Scott, I look up to and all of that. But, I'm watching from a distance, and I'm just hoping that this war in Ukraine can end soon and that we can have a peace deal with Russia and that relations can move onto a, smooth plane, and that the USA can gradually become more and more part of the rising new economy in the East, the BRICS economy, the new world that's rising in the East, and we can leave the Western colonial system behind. That's what I'm hoping for. That is what I'm hoping for. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And I also wanted to, I guess John had a follow-up question. And he said that Trump should threaten to veto the National Defense Authorization Act if the Ukraine funding isn't stripped. And I think that's a very good point. And I mean, I hope it doesn't come to that, though. I hope that it does, because I almost feel like he won't do that. I hope he would do that, but I really hope we don't have to rely on him doing that to get the peace treaty. I hope that we can just get a peace deal and the war ends. I hope we don't have to, because if Trump did that, that would be awesome, but that would be a very bold move. But I really hope it's not necessary. I hope that we just have an agreement and the war can end. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping for, is that we can just have an agreement and the war can end. I don't want there to be, a situation where the war is continuing and Trump has to do something really dramatic, if it comes to that, okay, but I really hope it doesn't come to that. That's my position, right? And that may be, yes, if it got to that and then Trump was in a situation where he did that, I would think that'd be really an awesome thing for Trump to do, but I don't know if we want to be at that point, right? I really don't know if that's, what we want. So, all right. So Gabby sent a question. So she sent Cash App or whatever. So Gabby, give me your question, Gabby. Ask away. What is your question? Right? Wow, we are really big in the Midwest, right? I think every single question tonight has come from either Minnesota or Chicago, believe it or not. Gabby's in Chicago, John's in Chicago, and Penny is in Minneapolis. So we are Midwest heavy, but that's the heartland, right? Right? The heartland of America. We're not a coastal movement. We are a heartland movement. We are a continental movement. I like it. I like it. I like it. So send me your question, Gabby. We are ready for your question, right? I always tell people you can either pitch me a softball and I'll knock it out of the park, or you can pitch me a hard ball and I'll still knock it out of the park. Why? Because we are undefeatable. We are undefeatable. We are relentless. We are relentless. Dare to struggle, dare to win. We march forward. We march forward. So we're waiting. All right. So Gabby says, can you make a more detailed explanation of how capitalism, how AI under capitalism destroys the working class? I can. I can. And instead of putting on that video that I've shown a million times on these streams, since you asked so nicely, Gabby, and since you're watching, I need to get myself a pen, and I will explain it. I will explain it here tonight in detail. So let me just, I should put on some music while I go and fetch myself a pen and marker, and we'll just do a whole explanation of the problem of artificial intelligence, why the problem is not AI itself, the problem is capitalism. So let me just put on some music or something, and then I will get ready, and I will do a whole explanation of that. We'll just go over that whole thing. So here we go. Put on some old Canadian communist music that's a little hokey, and after we come back, I'll have my marker and my charts and graphs, and we'll do the whole 9 yards. Here we go.
So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Proletarians of every land, under one banner we take our stand, and with an iron hand we'll overthrow the bourgeoisie. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Take up the proletarian task to smash the enemies of our class. Revolutionary violence is the path of the working class. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Marx, Engels, great Lenin and Stalin, their immortal work shines bright, urging us on to greater heights to win victory in our fight. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Glorious Albania proves to us that liberty is only one when the party leads the way and the people take up the gun. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. On Canadian soil a red flower blooms, for here we build our great party. To liberate our country, we must make the rich pay. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. CPCML is our party, we'll defend it with our very lives. Comrades, hearts beat in unity, and we fear no sacrifice. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Keep dictatorship of the proletariat and class struggle firmly in mind. Follow revolution's path and we'll liberate mankind. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Glory to Marxism, Leninism, and proletarian internationalism. Long, long live communism, the future belongs to us. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party.
All righty. Thanks, everybody. So now we are going to answer the question of Gabby. Gabby asked, why is it that artificial intelligence is destroying capitalism? That was her question. And that question is actually pointing toward the contents of a book that I published called AI is Not the Problem, which is right here. AI is not the problem, technology in crisis. It's a short little pamphlet that I put on Amazon. So here's the problem that has always existed in the capitalist mode of production. Okay? It's a 4-letter word that has always existed in capitalism. It never existed before that. And the 4-letter word is glut. Glut, glut. Glut. Glut has never existed prior to the capitalist mode of production. And glut is when you have a situation where the market crashes and the economy is in trouble because too much wealth has been produced. There's too much stuff. People are hungry because there's too much food. People are homeless because there is too much housing. Glut. Why does glut happen? Glut happens for this reason, all right? So let's say you're making tires, right? If you're going to make the tires, well, the first thing you're going to need to make the tires, you're going to need rubber and materials to make your tires. So that's A. But then you're obviously going to need to transport your tires to where they're going to be sold. So that's B. But in addition to the materials for the tires, in addition to transporting the tires to wherever you're going to sell them, you're going to need human labor power to assemble those tires. And that's C. And then, obviously, the whole thing is going to add up to D. And D represents the final cost of the product. What's missing? What's missing is the profit that the capitalist makes from the tires. In order to get a return on his investment, he has to have money come back in, right? He's paying for all of this up front. He has to get some money back at the end of the day. Now, he can't cut into the shipping costs because that's fixed. He can't cut into the cost of the materials. That's fixed. So the labor value that is put in by the worker is where the profit is extracted from. So really, the worker doesn't get, they put C into the product, but they don't get paid all of C. They only get paid C1, that's what they actually get paid in their wages. And then C2, that's the amount of profit that the capitalist makes. The capitalist is extracting from the labor value put into the product. Now, that's really important. And most people who explain this, they just stop there. They say, well, that's no fair. The worker is putting C in, but they only get C1. They're not getting the full value of their labor. And that's when people talk about exploitation under capitalism. That's what they're talking about. But then many people say, well, what about the employer? He put up the money. He started this. There wouldn't be any production if it wasn't for him. So he deserves to get his fair share or whatever. You're missing the point. The problem is this, right? So C1 represents the wages that are being paid out. For every product that is sold, there are C1. C1 is the amount of wages being paid out. C1 can never be greater than D. So the amount of wages paid out in the process of production are never enough to buy back the product that is created, right? Never are they paying out enough wages in the process of creating an item for the people to then buy what they produce, right? There's always more product created than there is spending power on the part of the worker. That's a constant problem, okay? And that in and of itself is why you have glut. There are more products and there's no ability to buy them. And that's the basis of glut. Glut didn't exist under feudalism. Glut didn't exist under, D is the final cost of the product, Gabby. Right? D is the final cost. The wages paid out are never enough to buy back what is produced. The process of producing products for profit always puts more products out than it pays out in wages. There's never enough wages paid out to buy back the product that is produced. That's the problem. That's why you have glut. That's why the economy shuts down. That's the boom-bust cycle. That's all the problems. That's why the U.S. government buys whole bunches of cheese and buries it in a cave to keep the price of dairy. high enough. That's why we have a military industrial complex where billions of dollars in taxpayer money is spent on military hardware that never gets used because they're trying to put wages into the economy. They're trying to stimulate corporations, right? There is never enough wages paid out in the process of production to buy back what is produced, right? That is the constant problem. That's called the value crisis or overproduction. But there's another problem, which is that C is the labor power that goes into production, right? Well, if you're trying to maximize profit, right, you want to pay as little human labor power as you can. You want to have as few employees as possible. And you want to make those employees that exist easier to replace, right? So you don't have to train them for very long, right? So the more technology advances, the fewer workers that are hired, and the workers that are hired are less expensive because it's easier to train them. They're more easily replaceable. They're just pushing a button or whatever, right? So C is constantly decreasing because of technological advancement. And AI is eliminating C in ways that we never even thought were possible, right? Computers can trade stocks better than humans. Computers can play chess better than humans. AI is making C smaller than ever before. The amount of human labor power that goes into production is dramatically decreasing. It is lower than ever because of the fact that machines are replacing people, right? And the capitalist can only extract his profit from C. He can't extract profit from this. He can't extract profit from that. Those are fixed. He gets his profit from labor value. So as C decreases, the rate of profit also decreases. So the amount of profit that he makes on each item is constantly going down. And that is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. The less human beings are involved in the process of production, the lower the rate of profit that the capitalist makes on each item. The percentage, the amount of money he can make on each item goes down. So what does he do? In order to make up his losses, he has to produce even more products, right? Because he's making less and less of a profit on each item. So that causes him to have to fill the market with even more products. So this problem of glut gets worse and worse and worse, right? And that is why capitalism cannot handle artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is making C lower than it has ever been, right? C and the amount of human labor power involved in production is lower than ever before. Marx never even imagined a society with so little human labor power being put into the process of production. And that is making the capitalist system completely unsustainable, right? Because they have to churn out more products than ever before. People can't afford to buy them. And the amount of profit they're making on each item they produce is lower than ever before as well. And this is the problem. This is why capitalism can't handle AI, because capitalism is all about turning human labor power into profit. But if you eliminate human labor power, where's the profit? And where's the spending power? The workers can't afford to buy the products, and the capitalists are making less and less profit on the products, but there's more product. It's a problem of abundance. It doesn't make sense. Why should abundance create poverty? Why should the fact that human beings don't have to do so much work and that it's easier than ever to create products and wealth, why should that lead to everyone getting poorer? It shouldn't. It's not natural, right? And as a result, the market is full of products, but people can't afford to buy them. And the amount of wages being paid out is going down, and the amount of profit extracted is going down. And this is the problem with the capitalist mode of production. It's called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. It's called value crisis or overproduction. And this is what Marx spent his life writing about. Everybody who talks about Marx never talks about this. This is in the Communist Manifesto. This is like the central thing that Marx talked about, is that capitalism constantly needs to advance technology to revolutionize the means of production. However, in the process of doing that, they create an economic crisis, because the more efficient it gets to produce products, the fewer workers that are hired, the lower the rate of profit on each item, and the market crashes, right? Poverty created by abundance. And that ultimately human creativity and brilliance has outstripped the narrow limits of a system in which production is organized to maximize profits for private owners. That's the problem. That's the problem right there. and that ultimately we need a rationally organized economy where profits are not in command. We need to centralize production and plan it out rationally so that we can get rid of the problem of poverty amid plenty. I always use the example of self-driving cars, right? With AI, they are getting to a situation where cars can drive themselves. That should be awesome. That should be great, right? Then, people don't have to drive, no driver's licenses, the human chore called driving isn't there. But in our system, that would lead to millions of workers out of work, right? Millions of workers would be out of work. And the products that are shipped, right? Part of the cost of the product is the human labor power of driving, right? And where are they going to extract their profits from if they're not hiring drivers anymore, right? This is the issue, is that capitalism has outstripped the narrow restrictions of production organized for profit. Human beings, we're smarter than this. We've gotten so good at producing that we need to have a system that enables us to keep producing and doesn't hold us back with these constant gluts of overproduction. And that if you look at China does not have this problem, right? China has a centrally planned economy. And with their centrally planned economy, they just keep growing. They have 5-year economic plans. The economy is centrally planned by the government to make sure that they just keep getting wealthier, right? And that's what we need here. We need 5-year economic plans. We need to centralize the economy so that wealth can just continue to rise. So no matter how much advanced technology becomes, we just keep getting wealthier. Here's the 5-year plan song from China.
Hey, have you guys heard what's going on in China?
President Xi Jinping's new style?
Yes, and there's more.
The Shisanu. The what?
China's 13th 5-year plan. Yeah, the Shisanu.
Oh.
Every 5 years in China, man, they make a new development plan. The time has come for number 13. Shisanu, that's what it means.
It's a huge deal. Like how huge?
Huge.
Like China huge?
Yeah, China huge.
Oh, that's really big.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu.
The Shisanu what?
The Shisanu.
But who makes all the plans?
There's government ministers and think tank minds and party leadership contributing fines. There's doctors, bankers, and farmers too, and even engineers who deal with poo.
Ew, did I hear that right?
Yeah, it's true. Chorus.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu.
The Shisanu what?
The Shisanu.
But how do they make all the plans?
First there's research, views collected, then discussion and views projected. Reports get written and passed around. Then there's actually more research and more discussion and more research and more discussion. Like at every level. Over and over, like through hundreds of rounds. It's
okay, we got it. Hundreds of rounds. Oh my god.
Crazy, right? Okay, 1, 2, 3.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu.
The Shisan what?
The Shisanu.
But it's not over yet.
When the plan comes out, the work's not done. In fact, it's really just begun. Because every province, county, city too have got to figure out what they're gonna do.
Whoa.
That's a lot to do.
I know.
Hey, what's it called again?
The Shisanu.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu.
The Shisan what?
The Shisanu.
Then the plans keep getting even better.
As the plan goes down from high to low, the government's experience continues to grow. They have to work hard and deliberate, because a billion lives are all at stake.
like every 赵钱孙李周吴郑王冯钱楚魏蒋沈
Chorus! If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu. Everybody's talking about the Shisanu.
So that's it.
That's it? Yeah, now it's time to get ready for the 14th 5-year plan. What?
Yeah, the Shisu.
The Shisu what?
And for me, that's what this has always been about. It's been about having a centrally planned economy, defeating imperialism and the rule of the world by big monopolies, overcoming the irrationality of the market, and having a centrally planned economy. That's what it's always been about for me. And understanding, during the financial crisis of 2008, I was in the Workers' World Party, and luckily, in the Workers' World Party, there was, a leader named Fred Goldstein, who was kind of a jerk in some ways, but he wrote this really good book explaining all of this, explaining what I just told you about the tendency of the falling rate of profit and value crisis and overproduction. And he drew very heavily from another book called High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy that said the same thing. And there's another great writer called Nelson Peary. And Nelson Peary made this argument in this very, very good text that he wrote called The Future is Up to Us. And on top of that, Lynn Marcus wrote a very, very good book called Dialectical Economics, making this case. And there's another very good book called Fascism and Social Revolution, explaining how the problem of overproduction necessitates war and degrowth economics, right? That makes this case. And that there's a lot here. And this is what it's always been about for me. And this is why I'm not a communist anymore, is because this isn't what communism is to most people, right? If you tell people you're a communist, they don't think about, centrally planning the economy. If you want to know what China's got, they don't think about any of that. They think about rage, burn it down, killing, violent. And I'm just not about that. I'm about having a centrally planned economy. I wrote this book, AI is Not the Problem. It's actually a section from my much bigger book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. I wrote this book basically explaining, this was after January 6th. I wrote this book basically explaining what had happened, and what's going on, what the political crisis in America is about. I have an understanding of all of this that nobody else seems to have. And I got it because I understand the nature of capitalist economics. I understand the economics of imperialism. I understand why the countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism are doing it. And I realize that the crisis in America right now is rooted in the failure of the colonial mode of production, of imperialism, and that ultimately AI is making it so this system of profit in command can't function any longer, and that we need a rationally organized economy. We need 5-year plans to get out of this crisis, and that I want to see vast abundance, and that freedom is tied in with abundance. And that's a really, really important point. No one talked about human rights or freedom anywhere in the world until you had the rise of John Locke and all of that, like the 1400s in Europe. Why? Were people just bad until then? No, right? There had never been an economic state of abundance. There'd never been enough development to even talk about that kind of freedom, right? And that human beings are deeply creative creatures that are constantly reinventing their relationship with nature to get to a higher plane. And that defines humanity. That's what makes humanity special, is that we have this ability to reinvent our relationship with nature and to rise to a higher plane, to a greater state of abundance. And that as we do so, the old system becomes outstripped. Look, I'll tell you where we are, right? Once upon a time, 8,000 years ago, there were a bunch of cavemen in the woods, and they were really hungry. And they said, we've got a problem. We are so good at hunting and gathering. We are so good at hunting and gathering. There's no more animals to kill. And we're so good at hunting and gathering. There's no more fruits and nuts to pick. We're hungry. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're too good at this system. We had a system that worked. It was called hunting and gathering. And hunting and gathering was a great system. But we're too good at it. And somebody said, you know what we ought to do is we ought to grow our own food. And we ought to start, instead of just catching random animals, we ought to breed animals and raise them as livestock so they can give us milk, so they can give us meat. And we ought to have a new mode of production because we've gotten so good at hunting and gathering, we can't continue to do it. We have outstripped the restrictions on hunting and gathering. So the only way we can get out of this crisis is by moving to a higher mode of production. That's where we're at. We're right back there. We are too good at production for profit. The only way out of this crisis, right? We've gotten so good at making shit, is we have to make shit in a rational way. We have to start. We can't just catch random animals. We got to start growing our own food, right? That we've got to move to a higher mode of production because we are too good at the old system. We're too good at making stuff for profit. We're so good at it, the economy is crashing and burning and can't continue. That's the issue. And these are not simple concepts. These are complex things to understand, but basically human intelligence and creativity has outstripped the narrow restrictions of production organized for profit. Just like we got too good at hunting and gathering and we had to have a new system. We now have to have a new system. We have to have central planning of production, or else we're just going to keep having economic crises. That is the issue. And I hope that that is helpful. Now, Richard asks, regarding the service sector, I think what people miss about the factories is that people were productive and the economy was productive. America must involve itself in the pursuit of new technologies like nuclear technology, nuclear energy, pharmaceuticals, space travel, and AI. That's the real economy. And what must Trump learn from Putin? Differences between Putin and the new right. Okay, so the first thing, part of the problem in our economy, it's not the actual problem. The actual problem is tendency, the falling rate of profit, and all of that. Part of the problem, though, is that we've financialized everything. A lot of the way money is made now has nothing, for example, Noah always talks about Uber has never made a profit. Amazon has never made a profit. They just sell the stock. The stock goes up. People bet on the stock rising. They don't ever have to make a profit because everything is betting and financialization. And that our economy right now, because of all these problems, has gotten to the point that it's based on fictitious capital, speculation, money that is not tied to any actual growth or wealth. And that is a big part of what we call the fourth stage of capitalism, destructive accumulation, is that we're at the point where no value has to be created. And in fact, it's through destruction that profit is getting made, right? And you look at, there's so many examples of this where stuff happens that doesn't make society richer at all. And in fact, it leads to society getting poorer, but that's the way we're making money. Right? We're making money through a cannibalistic mechanism. Great example is prisons for profit. That does not make prisons. Does that make society healthier? You lock up a bunch of people, right? They all have criminal records. They all are traumatized by being incarcerated. Does society get wealthier by having prisons for profit? No. But people make money from it, right? War, right? The military-industrial complex. We go blow up some country. Does that make society wealthier? No. But it makes a lot of money. The opioid epidemic, getting a bunch of people hooked on painkillers. Does that make society more productive? No. And that we have gotten to the point that the way our system is rebooting itself, and this is fascism. This is the economics of fascism. This is what Arpalm Dutt brilliantly laid out in his book, is that we've gotten to the point that the system reboots itself by destroying things, and they're desperately looking for things to destroy in order to keep the economy going again. And that is a nightmare, right? I mean, it's like the only way that they can reboot their system is by destroying things. They're running out of things to destroy. And that we have entered the era of destructive accumulation, and that Nazi Germany was kind of the beginning of that. What Holomer Schacht did was he rebooted the Nazi economy with mass destruction by creating a slave labor underclass, by restarting military spending. They put a bunch of the country, a big percentage of the country's workforce, into prison camps. They restarted military spending, and they did it very dramatically. And the German economy boomed for 3 or 4 years, and then it was back to square one. And that they are utilizing destructive mechanisms to stabilize the economy. And part of that is that you just have a whole bunch of betting and speculation, right? Real estate speculation. The reason that, so many people are homeless all across America, and the reason the price of housing keeps going up is because they don't make money off people actually living in the houses, right? They make money off of betting on how the market is going to do, how the property values are going to go up and down. And that when you talk about a non-productive economy, there's a gap between the amount of wealth and wealth creation and actual physical creation, right? And this is something that you can go read. The Roman Catholic Church was all over. Why is it that usury was considered a sin in the Catholic Church? Because you didn't do anything to create the money. You lend money to somebody, and then they pay you back with interest. You didn't do anything. You had money, and then you got more money by having money. And that's why usury was condemned by all major religions, because it's fake money, right? Because you didn't do any work. You gave somebody money, because you had it, and then they gave you more money back. There's no actual value being created in the process. It's fake money, fake wealth. And the more that speculation and usury becomes prominent in an economy, the more problems you're going to have. And we have an economy that's almost completely based on fictitious capital, right? And that is the basis of the problem. We don't have a physical economy. And I think that's what Richard is getting at with his question. Now, as far as Putin, the thing to remember about Putin is if you want to understand Russian President Vladimir Putin, you have to understand he was an important leader of the security services, the KGB, at the time the Soviet Union fell. At the time the Soviet Union fell, everyone in Russia pretty much believed in, or publicly said they believed in communism, Marxism, Leninism. But communism was being more and more watered down, and beneath the surface, they didn't believe in it. And there was one wing of the leadership of the Communist Party that was led by Gorbachev, and they believed in social democracy. They believed in Western liberalism. They wanted to make the Soviet Union Norway or Sweden. They believed in, what the Democrats believed. They basically argued that communism was out of date and totalitarian, and that we just want to create a welfare state, right? That Marx and all of that's out of date, and we're just going to create a welfare state. They were westernized liberals. Putin comes out of the wing, the opposite wing, that were called the hardliners. And they were people that very much admired Stalin, right? The Gorbachev wing was saying de-Stalinization, liberalization. And they were saying, well, we admire Stalin, but we don't consider Stalin to simply be a communist. We consider Stalin to be part of the Russian Orthodox heritage of Russia, right? They considered Stalin to be like a great czar. They considered the peoples of the former Soviet Union to have a spiritual bond with each other. For example, like the Soviet national anthem. When Stalin, originally the anthem of the Soviet Union was the Internationale, the Communist Internationale, and the Internationale, rise. But then Stalin changed the Soviet national anthem. And there's an English version of it that was widely sung. And it goes, the English version of it goes like this: united forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republic shall ever endure. That's not how it actually goes. In Russian, the lyrics are, unbreakable union of free-born republics, great Russia unites us now all into one. Great Russia unites us now all into one. Great Russia is a spiritual conception that comes out of the Russian Orthodox Church, okay? And that at the time of the Second World War, Stalin was very much pivoting away from just traditional Marxism. He defeated Trotsky, but especially during World War II, he brought the Russian Orthodox Church back. He gave speeches where he referred to the faith of the Russian people, and he was starting to appeal to Eurasian spiritual conceptions that go back thousands of years. Great Russia, right? Great Russia is a concept, right? That, there's Russia, the borders of Russia, but there's Great Russia, which is that whole section of the world that used to be the Soviet Union. The Russian Orthodox Church believes that those places are spiritually bonded together by their Russian Orthodox faith. And that is a spiritual belief that it appears was starting to show up in Stalin's teachings. And at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union in the late 80s, the hardliners who admired Stalin and wanted to keep the state-planned economy, a lot of them were converting to Russian Orthodoxy and becoming believers in Great Russian, I don't know what you want to call it, in Eurasianism, I think is what some people call it, but there was a, and that's where Putin comes out of, right? He was a communist, but he converted to Russian Orthodox Christianity after the fall of the Soviet Union. And he is a Russian patriot. He believes in Great Russia, right? He believes in Russia being, the people of the Russian Federation being spiritually connected to each other. And he believes that one of the biggest mistakes of the Soviet Union was the emphasis on national differences. And he talks about that a lot, that Lenin went out of his way to emphasize the different nationalities and different cultures. Stalin dissolved the House of Nationalities. Originally, the Soviet Union, they had the Supreme Soviet and the House of Nationalities. It was like a Senate and and a legislature. Well, they got rid of the House of Nationalities, where every nation had a vote, right? And they got rid of that because Stalin said, we don't want to emphasize different nationalities. We're all great Russians, right? Great Russia unites us now all into one. Unbreakable union of freeborn republics. Great Russia unites us now all into one, right? And that's Putin's background. It is this kind of anti-capitalist Eurasian thinking, right, that was rising among the hardliners. And Putin says the moment that defined his life was the fall of the Soviet Union, when he saw his homeland that he loved so much get ruined, just demolished. And his whole career, they've asked Putin, what was the most important time in your life? What was the most important event? He says the fall of the Soviet Union was the most important time in his life, where he saw his country ripped apart into a bunch of different countries and economically demolished. And he emerged in Russian politics as a guy who was key in fighting against the Chechen separatists. The Islamic extremists in Chechnya were fighting to break away from Russia. There was a civil war with a lot of ugly terrorism. And Putin won the elections on the platform of, I am going to defeat the terrorists. I'm going to defeat the Chechen separatists. And he came to power, and he immediately began restructuring the Russian economy to once again be centered around oil and gas, to be centrally planned, right? Again, that division between the Gorbachevist moderates, or whatever, the reformists and the hardliners, there's a fundamental difference of what does socialism mean, right? To Gorbachev, socialism meant free stuff, free jobs, free healthcare. So he's saying, look, we're going to become a Western country. We'll just give everybody a bunch of free stuff. And they didn't, right? The economy, it was looted. But that's what Gorbachev was saying. We don't need to have a centrally planned economy. We'll just be a welfare state. And for Putin and for the hardliners, it meant, no, we centralize the economy because we are holding together this section of the world, and we're focused on building up in unison greater Russia, great Russia, right? And that is the difference, right? Is that does socialism mean a centrally planned economy, or does socialism mean giving people free stuff? To Gorbachev, it meant giving people free stuff. To Putin, it meant centrally planned economy. And when he came back to power, he did it on the basis. You can read, Putin is an economic genius. He wrote his college thesis on how Russia's economy could be rescued by putting oil and gas at the center of the economy. And he particularly studied the economic theories of Charles de Gaulle and dirigism. This is very interesting, dirigism, right? What is dirigism? Dirigism is an economic nationalist theory in France that you build up corporations that are what you call national champions that stabilize the economy, right? And that dirigism is, it's considered a third way. It's not capitalism or communism. In Cold War terms, it's the third way. But if you look at China today, it's very dirigist, right? You look at Singapore, it's also very dirigist, right? And that you look at the Asian tiger countries where the military was controlling certain corporations, but you also look at modern day communist countries, their economic system very much fits in with dirigism, right? Which is that you have heavy regulation, you have the government building up certain corporations, you have a powerful state that plans the economy, but you utilize the market, right? And that Putin studied dirigist economics. Putin also met with Deng Xiaoping's daughter, and he studied Singapore, and he developed an economic understanding that the reason that the new right, you asked me what differences between the new right and what Trump could learn from it. Putin doesn't believe in free markets. He doesn't. He's not a leftist. He's not a woke person. They all believe in free markets. They just believe everyone should get free stuff, or that, there should be an employee stock ownership program. Putin's a conservative. He's religiously and culturally conservative and traditional, but he doesn't believe in capitalism. He believes in dirigism. He believes in a pro-growth state that plans out the economy. And he is a conservative in the sense that he rejects the market, and the market is a big part of a liberal ideology. I mean, that individualism, that the market is, even though in the West we think of leftism, socialism, and communism as being left-wing, right? The left wing focuses on individualism, whereas conservatism is more collectivist in its nature, right? Conservatism is the idea that you should conform to society, you have a duty to your family, you have a duty to the country, and that dirigism and a lot of the economic theories that are not capitalist but not Marxist, right? A lot of them are quite conservative. But American conservatives don't know that. Western conservatism has deteriorated into just the worship of capitalism. They believe the market is amazing. What they don't realize is the market is a liberal force. The market rips apart the family. The market rips apart traditional morality. Why is pornography such a big industry? Why is there porn everywhere in our society? Is that because there's the evil communists sitting up there going, all right, we are going to destroy the family. Let's just get to the pornography. No, because there's money to be made. There's loads of money to be made on it. Drugs. Why are we drugged up like a country? Why is kids are given drugs because they misbehave in school? They overprescribe opioids, drug addiction, drugs. Everyone is drugged up, whether it's legal drugs, whether it's psych meds, whether it's medications for drugs everywhere, because big pharma is making money. That's why. It's not because communists are conspiring against the family or conspiring to make people bad. That the market plays a very, very radical part. I mean, the Communist Manifesto itself acknowledges this. This is something actually Marx talked about, right? Marx talked about how capitalism is very, very liberal, right? Let me see if I can find the quotes, right? Got the stuff on overproduction and, but yeah, the market, well, here, I'll just pull it up. This is for the opening of the Communist Manifesto is Marx talking about how capitalism is very, very radical and left wing. I'll read it to you. Right. This is the opening of the Communist Manifesto, where Marx sounds like a conservative. Here we go. The bourgeoisie, historically, has played a most revolutionary part. The bourgeoisie, wherever it has the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, and idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy waters of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value. And in the place of numberless indefensible chartered freedoms, it has set up one single, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, has been substituted for naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie is stripped of its halo, every occupation hitherto honored and looked upon with reverent awe. It's converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie is torn away from the family its sentimental value and reduced the family to a mere money relation. The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found its fitting complement in the most slothful indolence. It has been the first to show what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. And it has conducted expositions that put in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them their whole relations of society. Conservation of the old modes of production in unaltered form was, on the contrary, the first condition of the existence of all earlier industrial classes. But constantly revolutionizing production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguish the bourgeois epoch from all earlier ones. All fast frozen relations with the train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All new formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profaned. And man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. Now, that sounds very conservative. He's ranting about how capitalism is getting rid of everything that's important to conservative people. The religion, the loyalty people have to their nation, to their community. It's making it all just about money, all the old beliefs, all of that. It's all being ripped apart, right? And it's all individualism, right? And that what we have seen in the developing world and in the 21st century, and start over the course of the 20th century and then starting into the 21st century, is that anti-capitalism has become more and more conservative in its nature. That's really what has happened, is that anti-capitalism originated as part of the European revolutionary left, but gradually over the course of the 20th century and now into the 21st century, anti-capitalism has become more and more conservative. It is about trying to hold society together, trying to hold families together and nations together and communities together against the market and the rule of profit, which is a liberalizing force bringing individualism and atomization, right? And Putin is very much a result of that. He's a conservative who is trying to defend his country from capitalism. And he's trying to hold Russia together. And he saw Russia brutally plundered and destroyed in the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union. And he came to power saying, I'm going to make sure something like that never happens again. I'm going to protect my community. And I'm going to do it by getting beyond capitalism, by having a centrally planned economy, by dirigism, by having national champions, by having government departments that organize and plan the economy. And is that communism? No. I mean, it's not Marxism-Leninism, right? It's not, Marxism-Leninism is atheistic. Marxism-Leninism is very much, modernist or whatever. There's a deeply conservative side to Putin, but it's anti-capitalist. And American conservatives don't understand that. American conservatives think that capitalism is magical and it's the answer to everything. And they don't understand that a lot of the things that are important to them in a cultural sense or a spiritual sense are being destroyed by capitalism. And that actually communist governments and anti-imperialist governments in the 21st century are really a socially conservative force. They are trying to defend society from the chaos of the market. And that is something the new right could really learn from Putin. Oh, wow. A lot of people. Just one. Sorry. Yeah. All right. Jacob bought a coffee. China just convicted a high-level party bureaucrat, Gao Zhengwen, of accepting $236 million in bribes and has sentenced him to death. The American government operated in this manner. Luigi would have had no incentive to behave as he did. Do you agree? Well, here's the problem with that. China has a completely different economic system. Right? I mean, China's economic system is one in which the state plans out production. Right? The American government is one in which the state just kind of facilitates production being operated to maximize profits for private owners. So there's no comparison. Apples and oranges. Apples and oranges, right? This guy who is a high-ranking official of the Chinese government who's supposed to be planning out the economy for the good of the country. Some people who wanted to make money were giving him money and saying, plan out the economy in a way that makes money for me. That's a really big problem because that flies in the face of everything that's supposed to happen. So they're giving this guy a very, very, a very theatrical, very public death sentence to make a point of you can't do that, right? The Communist Party and the Communist government of China must work in the interest of the overall national plan. We can't do that. In America, it's different. In America, for example, all the money out of politics stuff, right? What it really leads to is just making it more expensive to buy politicians. Like in America, right? For example, they have all kinds of campaign finance regulations, right? If I showed up at the office of a politician with a suitcase of money and I said, this is my contribution, I hope you win the election, I would go to jail. That would be an illegal, unregistered campaign contribution. However, if I was a billionaire and I set up a super PAC and it was completely off the record how much money this super PAC spent on advertising, spent on supporting the candidate, and I spent as much money as I wanted, and there's never any record of it. And they bought ads on television, and they, encouraged social media commentators to speak favorably of the candidate, and they did all kinds of stuff. That's completely legal, but it's a legal process. They'd have to hire a lawyer to set up the super PAC and all of that. So it's expensive, but how is that any different? The only difference between showing up at the office of a politician and giving him a suitcase and setting up a super PAC is that one is way more expensive. That's our system. Like, you can't outlaw bribery in our system because it's how it works. To get elected, you have to raise money. Politicians are constantly raising money, and they have super PACs, and they have all kinds of stuff, and that's how it works. So, what are you going to do? Execute every person who donates to a politician? Every billionaire CEO who contributes to a campaign or meets with a political leader? You couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. It wouldn't work, right? So what China is doing and we just couldn't do such a thing, right? It's like the two don't match. You're talking about apples and oranges, right? But I get what you're saying. You're making an overall populist point. If we had a government that fought for the people and a government that held the rich and powerful to account, Luigi, something like what Luigi did wouldn't be celebrated the way it is. Sure. But I believe they are intentionally making Luigi a folk hero because they want to foment years of lead in America, and they want to preempt and hold off a real mass movement, which is what this country urgently needs. That's what I'm saying. All right. So Gabby, I guess, has another question also. Go ahead, Gabby. Next question. So yeah, I guess this is interesting. I kind of was at a loss for words at the beginning of this stream, and now people are asking me good questions, and we're answered good questions and all of that. So, all right. Go ahead, Gabby. Go ahead. Take it away. Next question. All right. All right, Gabby, waiting for Gabby's next question to come in. All right. All righty. Who is next? Ready for your next question, Gabby. Fire away. Thank you. I have no political aspirations at this time. But, who knows? Maybe I'll be in life circumstances at some point where I can run for office. I think it would be a good thing to do. And I think it would be a great way to publicize our ideas. But I'm not in life circumstances that would allow me to run for office, with my job and stuff like that. It wouldn't be possible. So, all right. Gabby says, I appreciate how you analyze both capitalism and communism without blindly praising either one. You look at what actually works and doesn't, and doesn't. You're honest about both sides. That's why I trust you. We're not just communists. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, what's the question? I appreciate that. I'm explaining what is important to me, right? And that we have to kind of transcend ideological traps or ideological restraints, right? The world is not as it used to be, and we have to advocate for an economic system that will improve things, right? That, trade, not war and sanctions. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. But yeah, what's the question, Gabby? Waiting for your question. Oh, that's it. Oh, okay. There's no question. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I think we talked about a lot of important stuff on this stream tonight. Didn't end up mainly being about Luigi, but that's okay. Read my book, though. Seriously. My book, The Danger of American Years of Lead, is a really important book. You can listen to the whole thing for free. There's an audio book. Go to my channel, go to playlist, audiobooks. You can listen to the whole thing for free if you want. This is an important book. Due Dissidents, they actually said I was right. They had celebrated Luigi at first, and then they saw the killing of Charlie Kirk, and they said I was absolutely right. So, I go and read it. You can listen to the audiobook. It's an important piece. yeah, Noah is going to be speaking on that book briefly at our event. He's going to give kind of a summary of the book, a presentation at our event coming up, in July. Come to our event. We really need people to come to our event. We need you there. So please come to the event. If there's any way, if you're in the New York, New Jersey area, please come to the event. We really, really need people there. And so please register for the event so we know you're coming. We're going to be following up with everyone who's registered. If you've already registered and we haven't followed up with you, don't panic. We just have to, one thing leads to another. We got to get to you. But yeah, register for our event in New Jersey. Be there. It's going to be fun. There you go. What's this? Thank you. I learn whenever I watch these streams. I usually just bounce all around YouTube, but I stay glued to this stream. Well, thank you. Yeah, we have something very special here. We really, really do. I'm glad you appreciate it. Consider joining CPI, becoming a member. You can go to our website and become a member. You'll be invited to the weekly meetings that we do. We can connect you to local organizers in your area. Consider coming to our events or whatever. But yeah, we're doing real work here. And thanks, everybody. All right, I'm putting on the closing music, everybody. I'm going to put on the closing music, and we're going to call it a night. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.